What's up, guys? Fooch from Right on Korea. And at Right on Korea, you're either getting the latest news about Korea or you're getting the news late. But that's okay because I guarantee, even though that this news story is a couple weeks old already, that you're going to hear some information that you might not have heard in English. And you know what they say, if you haven't seen it or heard it, it's new to you. So let's go ahead and take a look at this news today. We're talking about Yoon Seok-youl's plans to move the Blue House to a different location. Now, if you don't know, the Blue House in Korea is equivalent to the White House in the US. And a couple weeks ago, Yoon Seok-youl announced his plans to move the location of the Blue House from its current location near Gyeongbokgung Palace in Jongno to the current location of the Ministry of Defense, which is located in Yongsan next to the military base. So a lot of people have expressed criticism, and a lot of news in English coming from people on the far left, they have all said that there's no real good reason to do this, and it's related to shamanism because he believes in shamanism, which I might add, Korea's history is based in shamanism. It's based on shamanism. And nowadays, it's very common for people to go to fortune tellers. So I don't understand why it's okay for normal people to go to fortune tellers, but when anything it's related to the president, this is, there was scandals a couple months ago when he was doing it was either a debate or some sort of interview on TV. He had the Chinese symbol for king written on his hand, and people were saying, "Oh, shamanism." Yeah, if that happened in the U.S., that's kind of something to be alarmed about. However, in Korea, there's a lot of shamanism culture, both historically and currently. Again, many people go to fortune tellers and make decisions based on fortune tellers. However, it's important to note that news was just a rumor. There's also been rumors that a lot of Chinese spying equipment has been equipped in the Blue House. Now, that necessarily might not be true either, although I would not be surprised if it were true. However, because I heard that there is some Huawei equipment in there. However, let's go ahead and leave the rumors and allegations aside, and let's go ahead and take a look at some of the possible reasons why moving the Blue House to this new location in Yongsan in the current building of the Ministry of Defense is actually really good. Now, before we get into the actual reasons, we need to talk a little bit about some history. And for those of you who don't know, I don't know how you wouldn't know, especially if you're watching this channel, it shows that you have interest in Korea. For those of you that don't know about history, in 1910, Japan officially annexed Korea. So Korea became Japanese territory, and Japan did a whole bunch of terrible stuff in Korea. However, that is the subject of another day's video. But the important thing here is Japan originally used their base of operations at the Gyeongbokgung Palace in Jongno, and then in 1939 they actually built an official building for the offices of the governor, or whatever they called the person in charge of the Japanese person in charge of running Korea, overseeing Korea. They built that on the current site that the current Blue House is located today. Now, Japan lost the war in 1945 after the US dropped 2 nuclear bombs. And after they surrendered, of course, Korea became free again. However, when the first president of Korea moved in, President Ri, he, instead of choosing a new location or even choosing a new building, he continued to use the same building that Japan had built, and his predecessors from there on out would continue using the same building until 1991, when President Roh finally tore down the building and built the Blue House as we know it today. Now, why am I talking about this in a video about moving the Blue House? The reason why I'm talking about it is because the main opposition for moving the location of the Blue House is coming from the Democratic Party. And one thing you need to know about politics in South Korea is Kukminehim, or the People's Power Party, or PPP, the party that Yoon Seok-youl belongs to that won the election. They have a pro-US, friendly with Japan stance, very not so friendly towards China, and very negative towards North Korea being the mortal enemy. And the Democratic Party that Moon Jae-in was a part of and who Lee Jae-myung was running under, They are extremely anti-Japan, a little bit friendly, but not too friendly to the US, a little bit friendly, not too friendly to China, and extremely pro-North Korea. But the important thing to note here is they are vehemently anti-Japanese. So it's not just Yoon Seok-youl that has been wanting to move the Blue House. It was actually the Democratic Party in the first place that wanted to move the Blue House, and Moon Jae-in himself, the second coming of Jesus for the Democratic Party, Moon Jae-in himself, one of his pledges when going into office in 2017 was to move the Blue House. However, he just was not able to find a suitable location and eventually forfeited the plan. But this idea of moving the Blue House is not all of a sudden. It's not something that came out of thin air. This is something that's been talked about for a long time, and the reason being is because the land that the Blue House is on was chosen by the Japanese government, and the Democratic Party truly hates the Japanese government, and they've been wanting to move it for a very long time. So this was originally their idea. They just failed to actually do it. Now let's talk about some of the benefits for moving the operations of the Blue House to the new location, the proposed location, the Ministry of Defense in Yongsan. The first one would be increased tourism in the Jongno and Gyeongbokgung area, because the current Blue House would actually be open to the public. Now, because of Gyeongbokgung, that area already receives a lot of foreign tourism. When the borders are open, people visiting Japan, they like going there to see history, to see the Korean palace. However, usually, besides summer months, yes, some Koreans go there. You can see it's kind of crowded, but a lot of the Koreans, especially the ones with money, are staying in Gangnam, south of the river. So with this open, it will bring a lot of domestic traffic into that area. Even Koreans visiting from outside of Seoul will want to visit the Blue House, and as a result, that will bring a lot of tourism to the area, which will improve businesses, cafes, and restaurants, etc., that tourist shops, whatever, that have been largely hurt by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the second benefit of the Blue House moving to the Ministry of Defense, which is in Yongsan, right next to the U.S. military base, is there are people that think that this will speed up the process of giving the military base back to Korea. Now, to understand this, you need to understand that even though there hasn't been any actual fighting, besides some isolated attacks by North Korea, there hasn't been any fighting since 1953 when the Korean War ended. That doesn't mean the Korean War actually ended. The Korean War is still technically ongoing. There was never a peace treaty signed, so technically North Korea and South Korea are still at war. That's why it is illegal, or it's impossible for South Koreans to go to North Korea unless they flee, and that's why North Koreans have to flee into South Korea. The two countries are still very well at war, so that's why the U.S. military base, that's why the U.S. has a military base in Korea, and that military base has for the longest time been in the center of Seoul in Yongsan. However, in the early 2000s, 2002 and 2004, two agreements were made to finally give that land back to Korea, and the U.S. military base would move south to a city called Pyeongtaek. Now, even though the Pyeongtaek military base is already finished and it's already operational, the U.S. has still not given back the land to Korea. As of now, the 20 million square foot military base, or 1.85 million square meter military base, if you're on the metric system, that the U.S. still has the old base on, only 2% of the land was given back to Korea. 25% was supposed to happen the first quarter of 2022, which is about by the end of the first quarter, which is already now. The first quarter is over. However, that has still not been done. So Korea is only in possession of 2% of the land. The rest of the land is supposed to be given back. And the plan was for the entire military base to be turned into the Yongsan Park, which would be this massive park for the entire city for everyone to enjoy. It would have been a great place, a lot of grass, a lot of playing room, massive land for people to enjoy. But considering how slow governments move, The estimated opening date for the park was supposed to be 2027. However, considering that the agreements to give over the land were originally made in 2002, 2004, and only 2% was given back in the year 2022, literally 20 years later, the idea that this park would be built on land that Korea has full control over in just 5 years, I can't see it happening. However, if the Blue House moves into the Ministry of Defense, there's a high chance that this entire process will speed up and the park will finally be able to be made. Now, not only is it a benefit that it might speed up the process of the US giving the land back to Korea, however, the Blue House moving its operations to the Ministry of Defense next to the park may actually protect the park even though it's not even built yet. And the reason why I say that is because there's been a lot of talks in the Democratic Party for wanting to build public housing. Now, what exactly is public housing? It's not what you might think if you're from the US. This is not housing for low-income individuals. This would be housing available to young adults and newlyweds at a fraction of the price. So there are several buildings around Seoul now, brand new buildings, amazing facilities that young adults and newlyweds can move into for a fraction of the price that it would cost to live in the area if it wasn't this government housing. I know people that are paying as low as $80 a month, and they are able to live there for 10 years, and this is all being paid with government money. And again, it's very important to note that this housing is not for low-income individuals. I'm pretty sure the friend I know living there, she makes more money than I do. However, I'm paying, $850 a month for rent. She's paying 90% less than I am, even though she makes more money just because she's younger than me, and I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And the Democratic Party was talking about using the land meant for Yongsan Park to build additional public housing. Now, if you're like me, I'm against the idea. I don't think that people have a right to live in Seoul. If you can no longer afford to live in Seoul, then you need to leave Seoul. That's just my personal opinion. But the Democratic Party wanted to build public housing there. However, guess what? When you have a building such as the White House in the US or the Blue House in Korea or any sort of government building, there are safety regulations that need to be followed. And one of those regulations is you cannot have tall buildings around where this highly secured building is supposed to be. So guess what? If the Blue House operations are moved to the Ministry of Defense next to the park, that means in the future, no buildings above 4 stories can be built due to safety concerns. So moving the Blue House there would guarantee the park's future and prevent the country from wasting taxpayer money on housing for individuals that can afford to pay rent in other areas, or even that area if they want to live to, just at market rate as opposed as this crazy low government subsidized price. Another possible benefit of the Blue House moving its operations to the Ministry of Defense is the Yongsan International Business District might be finally built. This was a project that was proposed in 2005. However, it was going to be $30 billion. It was going to be all these brand new buildings. The whole area would be renovated, built up, look amazing. However, what happened was the 2008 financial crisis caused by the US absolutely destroyed the world economy. And of course, at that time, this project was put on hold. And the current mayor right now, Mayor Oh Se-hoon, he was actually the mayor back in the early 2000s when this plan was proposed. 2008 happened, financial crisis, and then later, a couple years later, Mayor Park came in. Mayor Park is the mayor who claimed he was a feminist leader. However, he committed suicide after he sexually harassed his secretary. After that, Mayor O was elected again as mayor, and now that the economy is much better than it was, right after 2008, people believe that because the Blue House operations are moved to the area, there's a higher chance that the entire area will be revitalized, which could possibly bring this project back to life. And actually, there is land reserved already that's been untouched for this project, and that was also in the talks of being turned into public housing under Mayor Park. However, now that he is gone, there's a higher chance that this international business district might be finally built, and this would be a whole bunch of new homes. This would be an area for business and culture and trade, and it would be a wonderful area, I think, and it would be nice to finally see that built, considering it was planned 17 years ago. And finally, not just developing these new areas such as the park and the Yongsan business district, however, revitalizing and rebuilding Yongsan itself. Now, something that a lot of people who've never been to Seoul may not know is, despite how rich Seoul is and how developed it is in terms of technology in certain places, there are actually some, it's quite interesting, because around the city there are some, pockets where it seems like it's a window into a third world country. Some areas are just very, 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 very underdeveloped. And you can see a picture on screen now of something that I took off of Naver Maps. This is something that, for some whatever reason, there are pockets around the city like this. However, this is not too far from the location of where the Blue House is going to be. I believe if the Blue House operations were there, it would revitalize the entire area, including small little pockets, including the one you saw on the screen right there. So with all that being said, my point is, do not always listen to one side. It's always important to get the entire story. Moving the Blue House is not just a complete terrible idea. It's not a complete waste of money. Yes, it will be expensive to move there, as moving anyhow. You're moving, literally the operations of the entire country are moving from one location to the next. Is it going to require money? Yes. However, with all those benefits stated, in addition to the fact that we'd be saving tax money, not spending it on subsidized rent for people that can afford to pay rent, I think in the long run, this is not only a great decision, but it's going to save the country a lot of money and potentially bring more money in with new projects such as the Yongsan International Business District. As always, I want to hear what you guys have to think. Go ahead and leave me a comment below. Do you think moving the Blue House to this Ministry of Defense location is a great idea? Do you think it's a terrible idea? Is there something that I'm missing? I'd love to hear from you guys. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up, and if you absolutely hated it, despised it, you can go ahead and hit that thumbs down or unsubscribe. It's a free country. It should be a free world. You can do whatever you'd like to do. Thank you so much for watching Right on Korea, and I'll catch you next time.